Mikhail Gorbachev was once prevalent secretary of the Soviet Union Communist Party from 1985 to 1991. He was once additionally the first democratically elected president in 1990. Mikhail Gorbachev performed a key function in dismantling the communist grip on energy in each the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe. His aspirations for democracy and reform opened up the way for the give up of the Cold War and the bringing down of the Berlin Wall. He was once eliminated from presidential workplace in 1991, in the course of a failed coup attempt. Since leaving office, Gorbachev has labored tirelessly merchandising new efforts at social justice and situation for the surroundings via his very own organization, the Green Cross. Mikhail Gorbachev used to be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in October 1990. Gorbachev used to be born in March 1931 in Stavropol, the North Caucasus, to a negative peasant family. At the age of 11, the district used to be occupied by way of the Germans for 3 years, a hard time for all in the village. In 1950 he enrolled at Moscow University, the place he grew to be a member of the Soviet Union Communist Party. It used to be right here that Gorbachev met his future wife, Raisa Maxima, and they married quickly. After gaining a diploma in law, Gorbachev made plenty growth inside the Communist Party. Gorbachev received a recognition for being hardworking, truthful, and a properly loyal Communist member. Unlike his different colleagues, he used to be average in ingesting and now not fascinated in gaining monetary benefits. His dynamism performed some super achievements and the appreciative birthday party bosses. However, he additionally grew to become conscious of the barriers of the communist gadget and how the enormous forms used to be so hard to change. Gorbachev believed in socialism, however he wished to see it end up greater environment-friendly and higher directed to enhancing people's lives. In 1980 he used to be the youngest Politburo member, and in 1985 he was once elected General Secretary of the Communist Party. The exceedingly youthful Gorbachev stood in marked distinction to the preceding, getting older and fossilized leaders of the Soviet Union. The KGB had been glad to see Gorbachev elected, as they felt he had the capability to enhance the Soviet Union. They had been now not conscious of how plenty Gorbachev would exchange communism and the Soviet Union. Later, some KGB sources stated their largest mistake used to be Gorbachev. On turning into chief of the Soviet Union, Gorbachev introduced two key policies: perestroika and glasnost. Perestroika concerned reforming the economic system and opening it up to market forces. Glasnost concerned political reform. This concerned freedom of non-secular expression and person liberties. It paved the way for democracy and for many political prisoners to be released. It used to be specially large for the Eastern Bloc. When Jap European economies made calls for democracy, the Soviet Union no longer stood in their way, as they had until now in Hungary and Czechoslovakia. A year after turning into leader, there used to be a big explosion at the Chernobyl nuclear strength station. A couple of failings and efforts to cowl up serious protection breaches solely bolstered Gorbachev's view that the communist machine wanted serious reform. The Chernobyl disaster, extra than whatever else, opened the opportunity of an awful lot increased freedom of expression, to the factor that the gadget as we knew it may want to no longer continue. It made truly clear how vital it was once to precede the coverage of glasnost, and I need to say that I started out to suppose about time in phrases of pre-Chernobyl and post-Chernobyl. Turning factor at Chernobyl, Japan Times, the 21st of April 2006, on the worldwide scene. Gorbachev aspired to give up the fingers race as he said, "We want star peace. No longer Star Wars." He constructed up precise family members with U.S. Chief Ronald Reagan and especially with UK Chief Margaret Thatcher. He amazed the world through providing to make massive concessions in the abolition of nuclear weapons. He has been credited with enjoying a predominant function in ending the Cold War, in each the East and additionally the West. In his Nobel address of June 1991, he provided a positive view of how nations may work collectively to construct a higher world. I am an optimist and I trust that collectively we shall be in a position now to make the proper historic preference so as no longer to omit the fantastic risk at the turn of centuries and millennia and make the modern extraordinarily challenging transition to a peaceable world order. Nobel address. In 1991, conservative Navy forces tried a coup to overthrow Gorbachev to restore the Soviet Union and communist system. The lifestyles of Gorbachev was once in serious jeopardy. The coup in the end failed. However, on returning to Moscow, political energy had shifted from the Politburo to modernizers such as Yeltsin. Gorbachev resigned and by no means made a profitable return to Russian politics. Raisa Maximova, Gorbachev's spouse, died of leukemia in 1999. They had one daughter, Irina. Although unpopular in Russia for his perceived function in the breakup of the Soviet Union, he stays an influential voice. Although he had in the past supported Putin, in 2011 Gorbachev criticized his one-third time period as Russian president. He used to be additionally crucial of the democratic deficit in the 2011 elections. Gorbachev has additionally warned that in Russia, politics is more and more turning into imitation democracy, with all the energy in the government branch. Gorbachev has additionally warned in opposition to a new Cold War, and argued that America and the West want to be cautious in interfering in Russian affairs and Russian spheres of influence. On problems of economics, he has known as for a new point of view on financial troubles, arguing the 2007 economic crash confirmed the boundaries of the Washington Consensus on free market economics. Gorbachev has additionally situated the Green Cross International, one of the important sponsors of the Earth Charter, a motion to motivate larger difficulty for the planet and environment. We desperately want to understand that we are the guests, now not the masters, of nature and undertake a new paradigm for development, based totally on the charges and advantages to all people, and sure by means of the limits of nature herself instead than the limits of science and consumerism. M. Gorbachev. 301 Extraordinary Environmentalists, 2008, Religion and Spirituality. Gorbachev has formally mentioned that he is an atheist. However, at the equal time, he has been open to spiritual influences. He has admired the existence of Saint Francis of Assisi, Pope John Paul II, and cultivated a friendship with Indian religious teacher, Sri Chinmoy. Speaking of his very own beliefs, he said, "I consider in the cosmos. All of us are linked to the cosmos. Look at the sun. If there is no sun, then we can't exist. So nature is my God. To me, nature is sacred. Trees are my temples, and forests are my cathedrals." M. Gorbachev, nature is my God. What did Mikhail Gorbachev do to exchange the world? When Gorbachev got here to electricity in 1985, there was once a very actual hazard of nuclear war. The Soviet Union and the US have been at loggerheads, and the rhetoric of the opposing leaders left no doubt about the bitter ideological divide between East and West. In the Soviet Union, the Communist Party had maintained a totalitarian grip on the United States, ever considering the revolution of 1917. In 1985, there appeared no hope for the significant strength and attain of the Communist Birthday Party to be challenged, let on my own transform. Gorbachev was once a dedicated socialist, however he was once additionally involved in the reality and from his very own profession in the communist forms used to be conscious of the Soviet Union's limitations. After the Chernobyl catastrophe of 1985, Gorbachev's get to the bottom of to reform communism commenced in earnest. His thoughts of glasnost and perestroika had been certainly revolutionary. Glasnost concerned openness and strikes closer to person freedom and openness. It used to be Gorbachev who sought to free political prisoners and enable higher press freedom. He additionally started out the transition to a market economy. The adjustments that Gorbachev initiated started to snowball, and Soviet satellites in Eastern Europe won a style of freedom. Previously, tries at liberation in Eastern Europe, Hungary 1956, Czechoslovakia 1967, had been met with Soviet tanks and Soviet repression. But when borders began to fall apart in the late 1980s, Gorbachev used to be no longer inclined to use pressure towards his personal people. Some say the grip of Soviet communism electricity was once weaker, however it used to be weaker due to the fact Gorbachev was once a specific kind of chief who did pass the USA in the course of freedom. In overseas policy, Gorbachev often amazed the West at the depth and urgency with which he entreated nuclear disarmament and an give up to the hands race. This used to be regardless of some belligerence on the behalf of President Reagan. At the beginning of the 1980s, Reagan referred to the Soviet Union as the evil empire. However, after a few years, even this staunch anti-communist noticed Gorbachev used to be different. UK Premier Mrs. Thatcher famously remarked, "This is a man with whom we can do business. The stop of communism, the freedom of Japanese Europe and the quit of the bloodless war, may also all appear inevitable with the gain of hindsight. But a specific chief can also no longer have been inclined to relinquish power, enable press freedom and cross the financial system closer to democracy. It was once no longer simply Gorbachev who ended the Cold War. Other figures performed necessary roles: Pope John Paul II, Reagan, Thatcher, Kohl, and many regular humans of Eastern Europe who actually smashed the Berlin Wall. But Gorbachev, greater than everybody else, was once the imperative piece of the jigsaw. It used to be solely through Gorbachev that the grip of communism slipped and modified the world extra than anybody in the 20th century. Mikhail Gorbachev at first welcomed President Putin for presenting some balance after a length of turmoil. However, he grew to become more and more critical, specifically of Putin's want to censor the Russian people. Despite supplying assist for the annexation of Crimea in 2014, Gorbachev was once stated with the aid of a household pal to be deeply upset through the 2022 invasion of Ukraine, which severely undermined his life's work.